Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished visitors and guests. On behalf of Commander 12th Flying Training Wing, Colonel Joel Carey, it is my pleasure to welcome you into the 12th Tactical Fighter Wing Association's Heritage Display Presentation Ceremony. We would like to introduce some of our distinguished leadership and guests. Please hold your applause until all names have been announced. 12th Strategic Fighter Wing, 12th Tactical Fighter Wing, and 12th Flying Training Wing veteran, Brigadier General Tim Boddy, United States Air Force retired. Vice Commander 12th Flying Training Wing, Colonel Michael Snell. Commander 12th Operations Group, Colonel Jupe Etheridge. Of the 557th Tactical Fighter Squadron at Cam Bay, Colonel Al Walters, United States Air Force retired. Of the 480th Tactical Fighter Squadron at Phuket, Col Bill Cathey, United States Air Force retired. At this time, Colonel Cathey will introduce the other 12th Tactical Fighter Wing veterans in attendance and provide a brief background on the display.
First of all, it's a real honor and privilege to represent the 12th TAC Fighter Wing Association here today. And we've got some people who've traveled quite a ways. Of course, General Boddy came down from Dallas, or near Dallas. And we've got Sharif Lippi, came here from Albuquerque, Captain Air Force retired. We've got Lieutenant Colonel Bob Gretzel, who was in the 480th, I'm sorry, 389. I'll just catch you this quiz here.
Come on, Bill.
The 389th Tactical Fighter Squadron at Phuket. We've got Larry Garner, and I didn't get your retired rank.
I retired as Major.
Okay. Larry Garner, he's currently Dean of the Department of Business at Texas A&M.
College of Business, A&M, Central Texas.
In Central Texas, up at Killeen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Master Sergeant John Newman, Air Force retired. He's the manufacturer of our plaques. And we've got Captain Walter Reed, no kin to the hospital, but Mr. Reed brought his in family here and our photographer here. And I think I've just about covered our visitors. We're still missing a couple. They might walk in here sometime. I'll point them out. They're missing their TOT. I'm sorry, Colonel Eddie Pickrell with the River Rats here, and we'll have you introduce some more River Rats there in the auditorium.
Okay.
Back in January, Colonel Al Walters mused that there wasn't too much here at Randolph that depicted the combat heritage of the 12th Flying Training Wing, other than some very nice auditoriums named after Captain Danielson right across the street, and of course the Ralph Parr Officers Club. Pretty big displays there, but we didn't have anything on the base here that depicted the combat heritage of the 12th TAC Fighter Wing, and it's in the 12th Wing in general, and its different lives, starting from World War II and going through Vietnam as far as combat. Colonel Walters invited me to come down here to Randolph with him, and we started looking for ways that we could try to display the heritage of the 12th TAC Fighter Wing, representing the 12th TAC Fighter Wing Association. And this display up here is the fruit of that labor, and we've had a lot of help on the way. First of all, Lieutenant Colonel Brian McKay was our OPR for this, and he made sure the resources were available and found us a can-do project officer, Second Lieutenant Jessica Love, and she took care of a lot of details. Also, the world-class graphic shop here at Randolph, Mr. Tommy Johnson, was responsible for the actual artwork here, and I don't want to leave anybody out here. Colonel Etheridge, of course, supported this project from the get-go. That this was going to. We looked at a way to reach all of the students coming through Randolph and also permanent party. So that's the reason for this venue here, is that, because not everybody goes up to the Taj Mahal. And a lot of times they're going up there under very demanding circumstances. Yeah. So they may not be killing a lot of time there in the lobby looking at displays, historical displays. But also want to thank the wing historian, Mr. Lane Bourgeois. He couldn't be here today, and also our 12th TAC Fighter Wing Association historian, Mr. Norm Mullaney. They did some research for us to keep us straight on the historical aspects. And I gotta look here one more time. I don't think I've skipped anybody here. No. So this has been six months in the works here, and Randolph Graphics and the 12th Ops Group have been constant supporters on this thing here, and it's just really a pleasure to be here today to see this thing. Colonel Snell.
All right. Well, thank you, and for this tremendous display. The opportunity to say a few words here on behalf of Colonel Carey, the wing commander, who wanted to be here but couldn't. He's actually tied up in a meeting right now with the ATC commander on some other issues, and was going to break away if he could to be here. But it's my fortune that I get to host you. And I do remember some months back seeing Colonel Cathey and Colonel Walters walking around the Taj Mahal as I happened to be there one day in the hallway. And they approached me with the idea that they had for creating this panel, this board, and something to commemorate the heritage of the 12th, what is now the Flying Training Wing, what used to be the Tactical Fighter Wing. And immediately, I said that's an outstanding thing, and this is a perfect wing to do it, because there are few wings, I would say no other wing that exceeds the 12th Flying Training Wing's emphasis that they put on a heritage. And the benefit that brings, and knowing the folks that have come before us. You mentioned that this location was specifically picked, and I thank Colonel Baldwin, the OSS commander, and Skeeter McKay, who is soon going to inherit this as the commander of the 12th Training Squadron. It is exactly the perfect location, because every single new instructor that we get coming through here, which has got to go through PIT or pilot instructor training, is going to come here to go to the bookstore to hit the CBT lab, and they're going to pass this thing. And every single student that comes through here that's going to go out to another UPT base is going to see this thing as well, or our RPA students that are coming through. And just the pictures, the combat footage that you've got on here is going to attract people, and the symbolism of all the squadrons as they've woven through the group and the wing over time will naturally draw people's eye, because chances are they're going to see something that they recognize in here, as I do when I look all the way back to the far left, and I see the continuity of the 559th and the goats and how they've woven all the way through this, and right away that's going to draw them in. And so you've achieved, and I think exceeded probably what you originally envisioned, I think, in the attention that this is going to draw. As modest as it is, it's, we don't have a super, gilded frame around the edge of it, but what this is going to do for the young folks as they walk through, you can't put money on it. It gives us that sense of continuity in who we are as an Air Force. And we are the youngest service, but we're not really a young service anymore. We've got several generations of stories and of heroism and of sacrifice and commitment and service that people have put in front of us. And this helps to capture and tell that story. So thank you so much to Colonel Cathey and to Colonel Walters as well. And on behalf of Colonel Carey, because he's aware that you guys were the organizers of this, I'd like to present you with the wing coin.
Okay. Thank you. Well, part of this looks pretty familiar.
Well, thank you very much. But we have something in return.
Yes. We've got a couple of plaques to finish this off here. And you can see there's a big vacant spot up there, so we thought we would fill it with something that It depicts the 12th TAC Fighter Wing and the 12th TAC Fighter Wing Association. So if you would join me, we're going to unveil this baby here.
Look at that.
Okay, and we've got the designer and maker of this plaque right here with us today. And with a little bit of help here, we're going to hang these things up on the display here. But I was telling John earlier, I think that these would fit very well in the Chief of Staff's hallway up at the Pentagon. I think they're that quality. But they belong here at Randolph.
We better glue them pretty soon, or they're gonna end up in the Disney Black Eagles
What I want to do next here is, because we've had a limited space here and we have a couple of guys that missed their TOT because they probably got stuck in traffic on Interstate 35 somewhere between here and Austin. We're going to retire down to the Bellevue Auditorium where we'll have a little bit of graphic audio-visual aids and a place to sit and maybe a little more air conditioning. But really do appreciate everybody turning out for this, and we really appreciate the support of the wing on this and the 12th Ops Group. And it's certainly our pleasure and honor to have this on display here. And we're looking forward to dropping back by here and recounting it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, following the presentation in the Bellevue room, everyone is invited to follow us as we transition over to the Auger Inn at the bottom of the Par O Club for Stories of Merriment at approximately 16:30. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the presentation of the 12th Wing's Heritage Display. I would like to introduce Colonel Al Walters and Col Bill Cathey. Colonel Walters is a retired Air Force command pilot with 7,400 hours of flying time. He's been qualified in 10 different airframes and flew 215 combat missions in Vietnam in the F-4 for the 557th Tactical Fighter Squadron, 12th Tactical Fighter Wing at Cam Ranh Bay. Colonel Cathey is also a retired Air Force command pilot with 4,000 hours in the T-37, T-38, T-39, F-5, and F-4. He completed 170 combat missions in Vietnam with the 480th Tactical Fighter Squadron, 12th Tactical Fighter Wing, and at Phuket. He has also been a T-38 instructor pilot at Randolph with the 560th Flying Training Squadron. At this time, Colonel Cathey will provide a brief background on the display.
Okay, pleased that y'all can make this. Just briefly, a little bit of the history on this display here. Colonel Al Walters was musing to himself after one of his visits here to Randolph, or maybe it was a river rat function. But you know, aside from the Danielson Auditorium and the Colonel Ralph Parr Officers Club, which of course those are two pretty good sized facilities, but there wasn't any history of the 12th TAC Fighter Wing to speak of, except their Colonel Parr's displays there in the club, and nothing of the 12th Bomb Group, which is the earliest that the 12th Wing organization existed. And so he thought that, you know, we need to do something about that. We're getting up in years, we're starting to lose track of some of these things. And it'd be nice to pass this on, because there is a very rich combat heritage to the 12th Wing, starting off in World War II and continuing through 1972 when the 12th flag came to Randolph. So we went up and shopped around the base here. We talked with Colonel Snell. He referred us off to Colonel Etheridge, and his project officer, the OPR for this, is Lieutenant Colonel Brian McKay. He can't be here. He's at Squadron Officers, Squadron Commanders School right now. But we have been working with the 12th Ops Group since January, February timeframe, and with a lot of help from several very talented people. Colonel McKay hooked us up with a can-do project officer and Lieutenant Jessica Love. She found the right people to work with, and Colonel McKay gave her the horsepower to do it with, and the resources to work with Mr. Doc Johnson in the graphic shop. Also, we had support from the base historian, Mr. Lane Bourgeois, and also from the 12th TAC Fighter Wing Association historian, Mr. Norm Mullaney. So a lot of people had a lot to do with this, and so here we are today to see the fruits of this labor, and it's on display out there in the hallway for every incoming student at Randolph to see, and also the permanent party instructors coming through here. So we think it's in a really good place for traffic, for people to see it, be able to appreciate the heritage of the 12th Flying Training Wing. So without much further ado, I'm going to turn it over here to Colonel Walters to explain to you what's out there in the hallway. And we've got, this is not an eye test, but we do have some little larger slides. Unfortunately, pixels and printing don't go too well on this type of display. But you can go look at it on the hallway out there, or we can send you a PDF file of the thing if you'd like to have it.
Thank you, Bill.
Walter.
I suppose the genesis of all this commenced in my own background when, after I retired from the Air Force, Phyllis and I returned to our home in San Diego, in the center of military social life were the Navy and Marine clubs in the area. And you walk into Miramar, for example, and the minute you walk into the door, there's a big plaque of every fighter squadron assigned to the base. And walking down the hall, there's the history of naval aviation from Guadalcanal through the present time. It was always very, very impressive to go in there. So that's what gave me the idea that maybe we could do something better. And here's a couple of our dear friends from the Rats.
Phil Hogan and Lee Forbes.
Hi, Bill. Hi, Lee.
And Phil is from Louisiana.
Louisiana.
He's a
Did you drive a boat?
and he's a 12th guy at Phuket.
Great, great. Well, we're happy to have you. Thank you very much for coming. So at any rate, after Bill and I talking to the association, and after discussing what might be possible with Colonel Snell, you see the display in the hallway. It came together in any number of different iterations. The first one was writing all this words and music that went with it. And Bill and I are the authors for most of that, with Lane Bourgeois looking over our shoulder and bitching and correcting if we didn't have it exactly correct. And then our lovely wives, who are both school teachers, correcting our prose, grammar, punctuation, on and on and on, and finally we got to the final version. I have divided this up into various sections to talk about. I've got about 2,000 hours in that thing when I was an instructor pilot at Reese in the old days of the basic multi-engine pilot training program. Wonderful days, wonderful airplane to fly. But these guys were true heroes of the African campaign and the campaign in Sicily, the campaign in Italy throughout the early days of World War II. In Africa, they helped the British 8th Army chase Rommel all the way back into Tunisia. In Sicily, they attacked anything that moved, same thing in Italy. And when those campaigns drew to an end, then they were transferred to what is now Bangladesh in the eastern part of India, joined with the British again, and helped the British run the Japanese out of Burma. In fact, chased them all the way down the road to Mandalay, from Mandalay down to Bangkok. The group was inactivated at the end of World War II in 1946, and here are the awards of the group that accrue to the wing and are on the wing commander's flag. Notice here the billy goat. Huh? Oh, got it.
That's the new Billy Goat Commander, Mr. MZ.
All right, well, I in a little bit, will show you your heritage that goes all the way from today through the various iterations back here to the earliest days of the bomb group. Bomb group was also the recipient of the presidential unit citation from their action in Africa and Sicily and Italy. Next slide. This was kind of a troublesome area for the era for the Air Force. We just come out of World War II. We had the aircraft developed during the war. We had the new nuclear mission brought upon, and weapons that are absolutely humongous. The weapon that the B-36 carried was about 22 feet long, 5 feet in diameter, weighed 42,000 pounds. The B-36 was developed during the early days of World War II with the purpose of carrying huge bomb loads to Japan, thinking that war was going to continue. And when it didn't, why, it was pressed into the nuclear road. It was slow, 200 knots. And the probability of arrival of that airplane over the target in those days without fighter escort, El Zippo, next to nothing. So that's how the fighter escort wing came into being, was to escort the airplane. But it was only a year or so later that the B-47 showed up, and then the B-52, and both of those airplanes had cruise speeds of around 450 knots and simply outran the F-84. So the F-84 transitioned to the strategic world, carried a much smaller nuclear weapon, and a lot of them were deployed to Massawa, and the entire organization was deactivated in 1957. Next slide. So we come into the era of the 12th Tactical Fighter Wing. And when we approached that era, the only real airplane we had, or Tactical Air Command had, was the F-100. Yeah, they had the Thud, but the Thud was designed for the nuclear mission. It went fast, it carried an internal store, and it was a wonderful airplane, but it had to be modified. So we really had two that we could use in Vietnam. Meanwhile, the Navy had been developing an all-around general purpose aircraft. It was the F-4. And as we got started using the F-4, the Navy actually lent almost a squadron of F-4Bs to the Air Force, and that's how we commenced in the F-4 business. My instructor at George in the 431st was a graduate of that early Navy program, and he taught me to land the airplane just like the Navy did. Pow! This pretty well tells the story of the wing, and this tells the story of what we did. I can't think of a munition that was certified on the airplane at the time that we didn't drop at one point in the world, at one point in the war. We dropped slicks, 2,000 pound, 500 pound, 750 pound, into bunker complexes in the south. We flew into truck parks in North Vietnam in the Tally Ho area. We flew into truck parks day and night into Laos. We conducted night road reconnaissance in North Vietnam. And when not doing that, we had a squadron at a time sitting on alert at Cam Ranh Bay, 6 flights of 2 sitting there loaded up with the ordnance, a cross-section of ordnance. So when the Tactical Air Control Center called up and said, we need napalm, well, we had a flight that did that. Or we need high drags, we had a flight, so on and so forth. So that's the story of Cam Ranh Bay. Now I'm going to turn it over to Bill, and he's going to tell you the story of Phuket.
Next slide, please. The 12th TAC Fighter Wing started flying F-4s in the 1964 time period. They deployed to Naha, Okinawa in 1965 and flew in Vietnam TDY, I believe that was at Da Nang. And then the wing moved to Cam Ranh Bay in November of 1965. And it was tent city, pretty austere living conditions. but they did have a nice beach there in Cameron. But there were several months, and it was always nothing but sand there at Cameron, just big sandbox. When they initially got there, they had a PSP runway that I'm told that they had to hitch a bulldozer to that thing after a day's operation, hitch a couple of bulldozers to pull the wrinkles out of the runway and to bring it back to where it started the day from. You plant a 40,000-pound airplane, sometimes fairly firmly, without hurting the airplane, and that's going to move things. So the wing flew tens of thousands of sorties at Cam Bay, and as Colonel Walter said, in South Vietnam, the close air support roles, in Laos, in Route Pack 1, in North Vietnam, in the interdiction road recce, search and rescue missions, the full gamut of missions. But in 1970, the wing had moved out all their F-4Cs, and they shut down the operations there at Cameron. The wing flag then went to Phuket, which was the 37th Tactical Fighter Wing there, which had been F-100s, but they started receiving F-4s, 2 squadrons of F-4s, in the spring of 1969 from Da Nang, when Da Nang got all E-model F-4s. So the 12th TAC Fighter Wing flag came to Phuket in March of 1970, and the wing was closed down in November of 1971. So they had F-4s there for just a couple of years, and while the 12th TAC Fighter Wing was at Phuket, they were equipped with F-4D aircraft, had a much better bomb nav system on it, whereas the F-4C just had a fixed site reticle. F-4Ds actually had TIATOS, a computer bombing. When it worked, and when it didn't, it didn't. It was really bad. But while the 12th was there at Phuket, we flew close air support in Vietnam and also in Laos during the Lam Son 719 operation, when the South Vietnamese Army made an incursion down Route 9 over to Chapon. And the guys who flew at Cameron, they knew where Chapon was too. They flew a lot of missions in that area. But the 12th TAC Fighter Wing was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation for actions and support of Lam Son 719 in the spring of 1971. The other awards for the wing there, the Air Force Outstanding Unit Award, Vietnam Service Medal, the South Vietnamese Palm.
Galaxy Cross with Palm.
Galaxy Cross with Palm. That's a palm there. And then, of course, the Vietnam Campaign Ribbon with 60 device. They never did close that out there, I guess. The war ended in 1973. So the 12th Wing was in existence from 1962, flying first F-84Fs, and then transitioning first Air Force Tactical Fighter Wing to transition to the F-4, the F-4C. They did that, started doing that in 64, and then they cased the colors there at Phuket in November of 1971. Next slide, please. I was here at Randolph in the 560th Flying Training Squadron as a T-38 IP in April of '72. They didn't invite me to the ceremony for the change of the wing colors. But the 3510th Pilot Training Wing had existed here at Randolph for some time back, since right after World War II, and trained in various different kinds of airplanes, including B-29s and KC-97s. All sorts of missions flew out of Randolph here in the 3510th. But bringing the 12th Wing here, and they did this across Air Education and Training, I think it was ATC back in those days, to bring unit flags from lower numbered, Training Command had all 3,500 organizations, so they wanted to reduce the size of the numbers for the names of the units. They decided, well, how about if we maintain the heritage of these? So first at Randolph here in the 72 era was T-38 and T-37 PIT. Then the wing picked up missions of navigator training. Now that's called Combat Systems Officer Training, which is at a remotely located unit, the 306th Flying Training Group down in Pensacola, where all of our Combat Systems Officers, we knew those as WISOs back in our days, Weapon Systems Officers, or EWOs, Electronic Warfare Officers. That's all combined into one course now. Then the flying training mission up at the Air Force Academy was assigned to the wing here. So the 12th Flying Training Wing is one of the most diverse wings in the Air Force as far as the kinds of numbers of training. They also probably have as many aircraft as some numbered Air Forces, if you count all those gliders up there at the Air Force Academy. But but over the course of time here, since 1941, when the 12th Bomb Group came into existence, till the present, technology in the form of more capable aircraft and weapons, technology has marched on. A lot of progress. And the Air Force has taken on new missions, remotely piloted aircraft, which the 12th Flying Training Wing now does the undergraduate training for pilots and systems operators. You have space, you have cyber. You know, who heard of cyber back even when the 12th TAC Fighter Wing, 12th Flying Training was established? Nobody heard of cyber. All these missions, but one thing we want to emphasize with this presentation here in this display is that the mission of the Air Force is still to fly, fight, and win. And these other aspects of technology help us do that job better, more efficiently, and in some cases here not risking air crews' lives to deliver weapons or to persist over a target of interest to obtain intelligence. So we hope that when people come down the hall here, they'll spend a couple of minutes reading one of these things, and we hope that they'll remember the bottom line message here. That pay attention, and there may be a lot of things competing for your priorities, but remember, our job is to fly, fight, and win. And it's certainly been again a privilege and an honor to stand in here for the 12th TAC Fighter Wing Association, representing the Association of the Treasurer, and present this to you. I'm sure glad to see some of our buddies from Cameron and Phuket here for this presentation. And we're looking forward to seeing you at the auger end here. I think Colonel Snell would like to make a couple of words, and then we'll adjourn for war stories, and we've got some more slides. We've got a PowerPoint presentation of pictures. I do want to remark also that General Body is a 3-time member of the 12th Wing, and the 12th Strategic Fighter Wing, the 12th Tactical Fighter Wing, and the 12th Flying Training Wing. I only get to count 2. I was only a member of the Tactical Fighter Wing at Phuket. The Flying Training Wing are in the 560th, but the T-39s here at Randolph belong to Air Mobility Command when I flew T-39s out of Randolph. So I'm a 2.5 count there as far as being a member of the 12th Wing. Colonel Snell, would you like to?
So I wrote Shambo in for it, and I'm going to get to go first.
Oh, okay, super.
Col Cathey, I want to thank you and the Tactical Fighter Wing for the work that you guys did. One of the things that I'm constantly reminded of in this job is that we are part of something much bigger. And when you walk down that hallway, every second lieutenant will be reminded right away that we're part of something much bigger. It's bigger than our problems of today. It's bigger than the problems that we're going to face tomorrow. And it's bigger really than any one of us in this room, regardless of how much history we have in the service to our country. And that to me is a story that's important for a young airman to understand. And so you guys are helping us do that, and I appreciate it. And just like you have poured into us, the men and women that are here in the 12th Operations Group and in the 12th Wing are pouring into the next generation. So as everybody here knows, as our visitors, today our mission is to really invest in the next generation. And we do that from the very beginning when they come in the Air Force and we introduce them to flying at the Academy. And then, as you mentioned, teach them how to be CISOs at Pensacola, or here in my mission in the 12th Operations Group, teaching them how to be pilots, instructor pilots, how to be RPA operators in the next generation of warfare. And the things that our guys teach these airmen, they will be doing for that next generation 20, 30 years from now with the instructors that they teach. And that's a pretty sacred opportunity. And so thank you for reminding us that you have invested in us and we will invest in them, and that's the right thing to do. So we really appreciate that. Colonel Snell.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you again to the members of the 12th Tactical Fighter Wing for this incredible gift to us, and really just bring us back to center and remembering who we are and where we came from and what our legacy truly is. General Body, sir, thank you again for making the trip down from Plano to be with us here today. A pleasure to meet you. Colonel Cathey, and sir, thank you so much, Colonel Walters, for taking the personal time and effort to make this happen. You know, Randolph is a pretty special place. There's a lot of heritage here, and when we bring a lot of tours through, and we often do because we've got headquarters here, we've got the Air Force Personnel Center here, you know, a lot of times they'll come by and visit squadrons in the 12th, and just right across the street is you know, we've got a couple squadrons that they seem to visit more often than not, the Cheetahs, because of the heritage that they have with the Freedom Flyers and the Prisoners of War. And then sort of on the newer end of that, we've got you know, our RPA squadron, 558th, that's right across the street. But it's always a heritage piece, and they've got it with the Danielson room in there as well, that really makes that special, that makes it a connection. Otherwise, it just seems like, you know, another run-of-the-mill squadron. And to the young kids that are walking in the door, as they pass that, it's kind of like, you know, Colonel Etheridge was alluding to, they're of a mindset where they don't really get it just yet. And so, you know, they will think that they are in a squadron, and the squadron will have a passion. They'll think, well, this was always an RPA squadron, or this was always a T-38 squadron, until they look back and they see something dated into the 40s, and they show it flying a, you know, B-25 or something like that. And all of a sudden, then it starts to become a little bit real to them. It starts to sink in, and they get that over time. And again, we've been blessed here at Randolph because it's such a special base with our, you know, association with the River Rats. So thank you, Pick, and to all the rats that are here to attend us today that help make these, you know, ceremonies and the relationship that much more special for us. This has really been a treat for me at the 12th. I've never been involved with a wing that has been sort of this diverse. And I've been part of the 57th Wing, which is the, you know, wing that has the Air Force Weapons School in it. You got a lot of different cats and dogs there, but you got a lot of people that are of the same sort of point in their career and experience, and it's really working the integration piece of that on what is most on the forward and leading edge. This is quite different because we've got folks, we got cadets up at the Air Force Academy. Some of them, most of them, aren't old enough to drink legally or rent cars. But they are teaching other cadets how to fly gliders and getting them their first airmanship, just like it happened to me. Never touched the controls of an airplane before I touched the glider there at the Academy, and giving them skills and basic looks at this profession that they'll carry with them to the point that they separate and retire. So truly, truly very special. So thank you so much again for what you've been able to bring to us. And we treasure the relationship and hope to see you often at the Auger. So thank you.
At the Auger.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the ceremony here today. As I said earlier, 16:30 over at the Auger Inn for stories and pictures and a slideshow apparently and merriment. So thank you very much.
Bill Cathey and I of the 12th Tactical Fighter Wing Association brought this display together to show the combat heritage of the 12th Flying Training Wing. Your individual squadrons on this base have done an absolutely wonderful job of showing their combat heritage in their buildings. But what we lacked was something that brought it all together. Now, I'm a past frequenter of Naval Officers Clubs, principally Miramar, and you walk into Miramar Club, and immediately you're confronted with plaques of every fighter squadron on that base. And then you walk down the hall, and you see the history of naval aviation all the way from Guadalcanal to present day. So we couldn't quite go to that extent, and we certainly couldn't do anything in the Taj. We couldn't do anything in the Park Club because they do not belong to the 12th Wing. So we said, okay, where? And Brian McKay and Colonel Etheridge says, we're going to do it at our student section building, which every kid that comes through this place is going to see it. And that's what we did. So between Bill Cathey and I, and with the help of your wing historian, we plotted out the history from the current day in the Flying Training Wing to the wing that Bill and I served in Vietnam, and which Ralph Parr was there. I mean, Ralph Parr was the DO of the 12th Wing when I was there and had the pleasure of flying this wing every once in a while and survived it each time. Bill Cathey flew Ralph Parr's wing on his last mission out of Phuket. So we pretty well knew Ralph Parr. But then the history goes on back through the FA-4 era and the B-25 era. And I just happen to have 2,000 hours in that airplane from the time when I was a IP at Reese, long, long time ago. Now, I'm not going to recount all that, except I do want to point out some of the history. Who's here from the 559th? Very general body is. Who else? Here's the 559th. Here's the Billy Goats here. The Billy Goats are here. Here are the Billy Goats here. And again here. They got a rich combat history. Who's here from the 558th? There you go, guys. Here you are here. And here you are again there. The 558 was my sister squadron at Cameron Bay. I was in the 557. Many other notables were in the 559. Bob Russ was the ops officer of the 559 when I was there. Bobby Bond was my flight commander when I was there. And we had many, many other notables from the tactical air forces of the day in this wing throughout here. This display here at center pretty well depicts what the world was about for Cameron Bay. It was close air support. And if you look at this guy, and you look at here and kind of do the scale in your head, here he's bottoming out at about 50 to 75 feet. And that was about the rule of thumb for napalm, because we used to say to ourselves, if the can tumbled more than twice, it dumped it too high. And that's how it went. This was kind of the utility wing of Vietnam. We did everything. We went to North Vietnam, we went to Laos, we went south, all over the place. No mission was the same as yesterday, and then today, and then tomorrow. It was all something different. And as a result, it kept us all pretty much on our toes. Enough of this. You can read all of the depictions when you go down and visit the student squadron. I'm not going to try to tell you about it now. But what I want to do is talk to you about the challenge coin. Now, the 12th wing of today has your challenge coin. The 12th wing of yesterday has their challenge coin. And the tradition, it is said, commenced in World War I amongst the fighter pilots of the day, some of them very wealthy. And one wealthy kid had challenge coins cast of bronze and then had them gold plated of all things. And he passed them out to his squadron members. One young kid, probably from meager background, carried his challenge coin in a leather satchel around his neck. And this young man just happened to end up on the ground behind German lines. Industrious young fighter pilot that he was, made his way through the German lines to the French. And the French had been warned about infiltrators. They were about to kill the guy when the commander of the unit happened to look into this leather pouch, pull out the challenge coin, recognize the insignia, and there we are. So hence the tradition of the challenge coin. If one of your squadron mates asks you to see your challenge coin and you can't produce it, you owe him a beer. Vice versa, if you do, he owes you one. Now the fun thing about the challenge coin, I 2 months ago had the pleasure of attending my grandson's graduation from the Eccles Business School in the University of Utah at Salt Lake City. And part of the things that the dean of the school passed out to the student body, one, the certificate of graduation, two, a Ute challenge coin. And the dean proceeded to tell the story of the challenge coin and had it just about 90% right. So the tradition is moving on. Okay, enough of that. Now what I want to do is once again remind the IPs and the seniors here of the responsibility you have to the Air Force in that you're training the future of the Air Force. What I want to do is remind everybody here that when they're looking at the heritage of the Air Force, just look around you at one of these guys that's wearing a red shirt. And when you go to talk to one of these people, and if they say they just happened to fly out of Thailand in the 1966, 1967 time frame, you're looking at a hero. Now the river rats, of course, would like everybody to be a fighter pilot. Well, come on now, there's not enough sense. Your students are going to go to all walks of life in the Air Force, depending on their need. Some of you, yep, you betcha, are going to fighters. Some of them are going to go the tanker transport line. I got 4,000 hours in the KC-135. Some of you are going to go to buffs and others to B1s, and maybe a couple of lucky others to the B2 like Brian McKay did. You know, wonderful airplane. So the rats believe that while everybody can't be a fighter pilot, everyone should have the fighter pilot mentality. And what's that? Well, it's the will to succeed. No matter what, it's the will to succeed. And how do you prepare yourself for that? Okay, there's, in my estimation, 4 things. First thing, know your airplane. And that goes beyond knowing emergency procedures. That goes beyond knowing how every system works and what to do if it doesn't. It extends to knowing how to get the best, get absolutely the best out of the airplane. For a fighter, that's how to stay at cornering speed and maintain cornering speed no matter what, because that's what's going to save your life. In a big airplane, I always believed it was how to get the maximum nautical air miles per 1,000 pounds out of every bit of gas you had on board that airplane, because you're going to need it at some point. Rule number 1, know your airplane. Number 2, know where the hell you are. Many guys have been killed and killed themselves because they did not know where they were. Now, a lot of you are going to go into very sophisticated airplanes with moving map displays that are going to tell you everything you ever wanted to know but were afraid to ask. But you need to prepare yourself by studying your area of operation beforehand, so that when you look at the map display, automatically it begins to click to you. Yeah, I recognize that, yeah, I recognize that, and yes, I recognize this. Rule number 3, learn to fly instruments. Now you're going to have some very, very sophisticated stuff in the airplane, far better than the steam gauges I learned to fly on, that are going to tell you everything you want to know. But you can also run the risk of avionics failure. So know how to use what you have, but also know how to use your basic instruments as a fallback position. And of course, with this comes be comfortable at night. I mean, really be comfortable at night. Because there are oftentimes you're going to be called upon to go places no one else wants to go. They're going to call upon you. And you got to go because people are out there dying. And you will go. And it's these combination of things. Know your airplane, know how to get the most out of it, know where you are, know how to fly instruments that are going to give you the confidence, the self-confidence that, yeah, you betcha, I can go do that and lead me to that briar patch. So the river rats, when they turn around and they say, oh, we'd like everybody to be a fighter pilot. Well, that's not going to happen. But we want everybody to have that aggressive spirit of a fighter pilot. And yes, that can happen if you will practice these 4 rules that I just gave you. So, okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have to say tonight. And I want to turn it over to Ed Pickerel, the leader of the PAR Pack, and he'll probably have a few other things to say. Ed?
Before I get started, Big Al asked me to introduce some of the river rats, but we've got so many of them here, I'm going to have to kind of wander around and stuff. But first one, I want to, before I do that, I want to introduce, we got some really distinguished visitors here, and one of them's getting a hug is Margaret Parr. She's the widow of our Margaret Parr. We also got John Harrington, 98 years old, still playing 18 holes of golf 2 times a week when he goes out with his grasshoppers. Graduated from pilot training in 1940. 3 years later, he's a squadron commander. He told me, he says, if you were competent and survived, you got promoted and stuff like that. and his lovely girlfriend is Nelderberry. It's going to be 94. John lives in Fort Worth, so he drives down here twice a month to see his girlfriend and stuff. So love is beautiful. Love is beautiful. And for our river rats, I want to introduce first Gary Baber. I took over from him about as a sink rat about 6 to 9 months ago. He's River Rat of the Year. A couple years ago. I got to find out what it is before I introduce him again and stuff like that. But he's River Rat of the Year, and he was our sink for 9, 10, 12 years. Terry Stein, Frank Capp, Phil Hogan from Louisiana, Lee Forbes, Big Al Walters, Wild Bill, I can't say it. Wild Bill. I can't say it. Gary McDaniels, Bill Ferrier, stuff like that. General Robertson back in the back someplace and stuff. So,
Eddie, let me introduce General Tim Body.
General Body is also a river rat from Plano, Texas.
He was my wing commander, 51st Wing at Osan when I was the commander of the 36th Tank Fighter Squadron. Great guy.
Everybody knows that.
Colonel Essery's asked me to talk a little bit about the Vietnam era. So what I was thinking about, it was an era of improvising, and for the military, not just for the Air Force. 1963, when President Kennedy was assassinated, we had 15,000 Air Force or military advisors in Vietnam. President Johnson takes over, and in 1965 he builds us up to 500,000 troops. And the military didn't want to do it because in the 60s the U.S. military plan was to defend Western Europe, okay? And that's what everything was designed for. And the last thing they want to do is get into a land war, guerrilla war in Vietnam. So, about being the commander-in-chief, they did what they said. So, I can't imagine the things that the Army went through in improvising, from tank maneuvering, artillery blasts, so forth and so on, to having small outposts on mountaintops in Vietnam. But in the Air Force, one of our primary fighters was the F-100, but it was really only good for close air support. The other one that we had was the F-105 Thunderstreak, and if you ever seen a picture of it, it got a great big, huge cigar-type fuselage and little tiny wings, but a huge engine. And that thing could go 800 miles an hour, 800 knots on the deck in a straight line. If you asked it to turn, they'd say, yeah. Give me a little time to think about it. But they loaded conventional weapons on it. It had a fantastic, very accurate weapons delivery systems, and the Air Force adjusted. The F-4, designed by the Navy for high altitude fleet defense over water, okay? Whatever, I can't remember the name of the program, but the Air Force canceled the follow-on program for the 105 and F-100, and then we had to go with the F-4. And not a little more maneuverable than the F-105, but it still had problems against MiGs, so forth and so on. The C model had no computing anything. You know, it's hard pipper. The D model had what we call dive toss, and it was only good if all the squirrels worked in sequence, which they didn't do very often. And then finally, and neither one of the C's or the D's didn't have a gun. So it took us 3 models before we got the gun on a fighter airplane again.
Internal gun.
I'm sorry?
Internal gun.
Yes, internal gun. Yeah, because we could carry the Su-23, Su-16, on the thing. So it was an era of improvisation, okay? But I'm betting that it was the start of not having a rote doctrine, so forth and so on. And I think that the 12th Wing is going through some improvising as we speak now. So welcome to the Air Force. I thank you for serving. God bless. Thank you.
Vic, thank you for sharing. To the 12th Tactical Fighter Wing, thank you, all of you, for sponsoring that. As we shared in our ceremony, it reminds us that we stand on the shoulder of giants. Our mission is bigger than ourselves. The retirees in the room and the folks that served as veterans speak to that loudly, and we see that every day when we go out and we invest in the airmen for the next generation. We're something bigger than ourselves. And what strikes me is, you're right, there is a lesson for us to learn. We have grown up in an Air Force where we've had all the money to make all the stuff that we've needed in order to win the war. That era is gone, and we're out of money and we have to think. And I would argue that the reason that there are so many river rats here today, there are so many Tactical Fighter Wing folks here today that are so proud of what they did, is because they were warriors at their heart and they knew how to win. So thank you for showing us how to do that. We appreciate it. And the food has been on behalf of the 12th Tactical Fighter Wing. So as you're enjoying your time here, be sure to thank those folks. And thank you, everybody, for coming out.
Thank you.